My son threw my bags out on the street after winning $7 million in the lottery. He shouted. If it's up to me, you'll die poor. I left in silence. The shock came when he checked the name on the ticket. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought my own son would throw me out like garbage on a Tuesday morning in March. But that's exactly what Martin did, right there on Maple Street, in front of all the neighbors who had watched me raise him alone for 30 years. The lottery ticket was still warm in his trembling hands when he screamed at me to get out. $7 million. That's what the numbers I had memorized by heart were worth. The same numbers I had been playing every week for the past 12 years, ever since his father died and left us with nothing but debt and broken dreams. Pack your bags, old woman. Martin's voice cracked like a whip across our front yard. His wife Sarah stood behind him with that smug smile I had grown to hate, recording everything on her phone. You hear me? 7 million. I'm rich now, and I don't need you dragging me down anymore. My hands shook as I watched him wave that piece of paper in the air like a victory flag. The same ticket I had bought at Murphy's Corner store just 2 days before, using the last $20 from my Social Security check. The same numbers he had picked out himself just like always while I paid at the counter. Martin, honey, please. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Let's just talk about this inside. The neighbors don't need to see. The neighbors. He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You think I care what these people think? I'm a millionaire now. I can buy this whole street if I want to. Sarah stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the concrete. She had never worked a day in her life, but somehow always managed to dress like she owned the world. Judy, sweetie, she said in that fake voice she used when she wanted something. Martin and I have been talking. We think it's time for you to find your own place. We need our space, and now we can afford to help you transition. Transition. Like I was some kind of business deal they needed to close. I had lived in this house for 43 years. I had painted every wall, planted every flower in the garden, fixed every broken pipe when we couldn't afford a plumber. This was the house where Martin took his first steps, where I nursed him through pneumonia when he was 7, where I sat up countless nights helping him with homework while working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Where am I supposed to go? The words fell out of my mouth before I could stop them. Martin's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. That's not my problem anymore. You always said I should stand on my own 2 feet, right? Well, now it's your turn. I watched my son walk back into the house, my house, and return with 2 old suitcases. He threw them onto the sidewalk with such force that one of them burst open, spilling my clothes across the pavement. A cotton nightgown I had owned for 15 years landed in a puddle from yesterday's rain. Mrs. Patterson from next door was watering her roses, but I could see her watching us from the corner of her eye. The Johnsons across the street had stopped loading their car and were staring openly. These people had known me since Martin was in diapers. They had seen me struggle, seen me sacrifice, seen me build something from nothing. If you think I'm going to support you for the rest of your miserable life, you're wrong, Martin continued, his voice getting louder with each word. I'm done being your retirement plan. You want to know the truth? You've been nothing but dead weight since Dad died. Dead weight. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I had given this boy everything. I had worked at the diner until my feet bled, cleaned office buildings until my back screamed in pain. Also, he could have what I never had. College. Opportunities. A future. Sarah was still filming, probably planning to post it online later with some caption about ungrateful family members. She had always resented me, always made Martin choose between his wife and his mother. And now, with $7 million in their bank account, she had finally won. Martin. I tried one last time, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm your mother. He stopped and looked at me then. Really looked at me, and for just a moment I thought I saw something human flicker behind his eyes. But then Sarah touched his arm and whispered something in his ear, and whatever softness had been there disappeared. If you depend on me, you'll die poor, he said, his words cutting through the morning air like broken glass. Get out of my sight. I bent down and gathered my scattered clothes, stuffing them back into the broken suitcase as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. 43 years of my life reduced to 2 battered pieces of luggage on a sidewalk. I didn't say another word. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just picked up my suitcases and walked away from the only home I had ever known, leaving behind the son I had loved more than my own life. I found myself at the Riverside Motel that first night, staring at water stains on the ceiling while the reality of my situation sank in. $27.63. That's all I had left in my purse after paying for the room. At 65, I was homeless, nearly broke, and completely alone. But lying there in that musty-smelling bed, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to how it all began. How did I raise such a cruel stranger? Martin was only 5 when his father Robert died in that construction accident. One moment Robert was kissing me goodbye at 6 in the morning, promising to fix the leaky faucet when he got home. By 3 that afternoon, I was standing in a hospital corridor being told that my husband of 10 years was gone. The insurance money barely covered the funeral costs. Robert had always been terrible with paperwork, and somehow his life insurance had lapsed without either of us knowing. I was left with a mortgage I couldn't afford, a kindergartner who kept asking when Daddy was coming home, and absolutely no idea how to survive. I remember that first night alone with Martin. He crawled into my bed around midnight, crying because he couldn't find his favorite stuffed elephant. I held him close and made a promise in the darkness. No matter what happened, I would make sure he never felt the kind of fear and uncertainty that was eating me alive. That promise cost me everything. I took 3 jobs that first year. Breakfast shift at Mel's Diner from 5 to 11, cleaning office buildings from noon to 6, and babysitting the neighbors' twins most evenings. Martin stayed with Mrs. Chun next door during the day, and I would rush between jobs just to steal a few minutes with him before bedtime. When Martin turned 8, he started asking why we never had the toys his friends had, why we never went on vacations like other families. I should have explained that money was tight, that we had to be careful. Instead, I worked harder. I picked up weekend shifts, took on extra cleaning contracts, sold my grandmother's jewelry piece by piece. "Mom, why don't you have a boyfriend like Tommy's mom?" Martin asked me one evening when he was 12. We were eating mac and cheese from a box again, and I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. "I don't need a boyfriend, sweetheart," I told him. "I have you." It was true. Men had asked me out over the years. Good men with steady jobs and kind hearts. But dating meant time away from Martin, money spent on myself instead of him. It meant potentially bringing someone into our little world who might not love my son the way I did. There was David, the manager at the grocery store where I worked part-time. He was patient and funny, and Martin actually liked him. But when David started talking about moving in together, about becoming a family, I panicked. What if he left like Robert had? What if Martin got attached and then lost another father figure? I broke it off and picked up extra hours instead. By the time Martin was in high school, I had convinced myself that my sacrifices were paying off. He was smart, popular, destined for college. I worked myself to exhaustion paying for his sports equipment, his class trips, his senior year ring. When he wanted to take Sarah to prom in a limousine, I sold my car and walked to work for 3 months. "You're the best mom in the world," he told me that prom night, straightening his rented tuxedo in the mirror. "I'm going to take care of you when I'm older, I promise." I believed him. I believed him when he went away to college and rarely called. I believed him when he graduated and moved in with Sarah without even inviting me to meet her parents. I believed him when he got married in a courthouse ceremony that I learned about 3 days later. "We wanted something small and intimate," Sarah had explained when I finally met her, 6 months after the wedding. She looked me up and down like I was something unpleasant she had found on her shoe. "I'm sure you understand." I should have seen it then, the way she positioned herself between Martin and me during conversations, the way she rolled her eyes when I told stories about his childhood, the way she constantly steered him away from any topic that included me. But I kept believing. I believed him when he said they couldn't afford to help with my rent. I believed him when he said they were too busy to visit. I believed him when he said Sarah was just shy, that she would warm up to me eventually. Even when they moved into the big house on Elm Street and suddenly had money for European vacations and luxury cars, I believed his explanations. Sarah's father had helped them. Sarah had gotten a promotion. Sarah. It was always Sarah who had the answers, Sarah who made the decisions, Sarah who seemed to control every aspect of my son's life. I never asked for much. Just a phone call on my birthday, a visit on holidays, Maybe dinner once a month so I could see the man my little boy had become. But even those small requests became too much to ask. The lottery ticket tradition started 3 years after Robert's death. Martin was 8 and fascinated by the numbers on television every Saturday night. "Pick some numbers, Mom," he would say, bouncing on the couch. "Maybe we'll win $1 million and buy a castle." I started buying 1 ticket a week, always letting him choose the numbers. It became our special thing, our moment of hope in an otherwise difficult life. Even after he grew up and moved away, I kept playing those same numbers every week. Our numbers. The numbers that represented every dream I had ever had for both of us. 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. I could recite them in my sleep. Now, lying in that motel room, I realized that those numbers had finally paid off. $7 million. Enough money to change everything. Enough money to make Martin see me as valuable again. If only he knew that the ticket burning a hole in his pocket belonged to the woman he had just thrown away like garbage. 3 days after throwing me out, Martin walked into the state lottery office with that winning ticket clutched in his sweaty palm, probably already planning how to spend his $7 million. I can only imagine the shock on his face when the clerk behind the counter looked at the ticket and then looked at him with confusion. "I'm sorry, sir, but this ticket is registered under the name Judith Eleanor Patterson," the clerk said, reading from her computer screen. "Are you Judith Eleanor Patterson?" I wasn't there, of course, but I knew exactly how that conversation went. I had been buying lottery tickets for 12 years, and I always filled out the back myself. Always wrote my full name in careful block letters. Always signed it properly. I wasn't taking any chances with something that could potentially be valuable. Martin must have turned white as a sheet. That's my mother," he probably stammered. "But I picked the numbers. This is my ticket." "Sir, according to our records, this ticket was purchased at Murphy's Corner Store on Maple Street at 2:37 p.m. on Sunday, March 15th. The purchaser clearly wrote her name and address on the back. Legally, this ticket belongs to Judith Patterson. I imagine Sarah was with him, probably dressed in some expensive outfit she had already bought with money they thought they had. I picture her face contorting with rage when she realized that the millions they had been counting on legally belonged to the woman they had just humiliated and discarded. "There has to be some mistake," Martin probably insisted. "My mother wouldn't. She doesn't even understand how these things work." But I did understand. I had always understood. When you grow up poor and stay poor for 65 years, you learn to read every fine print, understand every rule, protect yourself in every small way you can. I had been filling out those lottery tickets correctly since the very first one, even though I never really expected to win. The clerk was probably sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, sir. Only the registered owner can claim this prize. If your mother wants to give you the money, that's between you and her. But she has to be the one to claim it." Martin left that office with empty hands and a panic attack. I know this because Mrs. Patterson, my dear neighbor who had watched the whole humiliating scene on Tuesday morning, called me at the motel that evening. "Judy, honey." Her voice was gentle through the phone. "I don't know what's going on, but your son came by looking for you around 6 o'clock. He seemed very upset." Mrs. Patterson had been my neighbor for 22 years. She had brought me casseroles when Robert died, watched Martin when I had to work late, shoveled my sidewalk every winter when her arthritis wasn't too bad. She was one of the few people who understood what kind of mother I had been. "He was crying, Judy. Actually crying. He kept saying he needed to find you, that there had been a terrible mistake." A mistake. That's what he called it. Not the way he had treated me, not the cruelty he had shown, not the fact that he had thrown his own mother out like trash. The mistake was that he couldn't get his hands on money that was never his to begin with. "Did you tell him where I was?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Of course not, dear. After what I saw Tuesday morning, that boy doesn't deserve to know where you are until he comes to his senses." Mrs. Patterson had always been protective of me, especially after Robert died. She had seen me struggle, seen me sacrifice, seen me give everything I had to a son who took it all for granted. She was probably the only person in the neighborhood who wasn't surprised by Martin's behavior. "Judy," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I have to tell you something. That wife of his, Sarah, she was going around the neighborhood this afternoon asking questions. She wanted to know if anyone had seen you. If anyone knew where you went. She was trying to act concerned, but I could see right through her. I could picture Sarah's performance perfectly. The fake tears, the trembling voice, the story about how worried they were about poor old Judy wandering around with nowhere to go. She was probably hoping one of the neighbors would feel sorry for her and reveal my location. She even had the nerve to ask if I thought you might have done something dramatic, Mrs. Patterson said, and I could hear the anger in her voice. As if you would hurt yourself over their selfishness. That girl doesn't know you at all. But I wasn't planning to hurt myself. For the first time in years, I was actually starting to feel something like hope. Lying in that motel room, I realized that I held all the power now. The money was mine. The choice was mine. The future was mine. I thought about Martin frantically calling my old phone number, forgetting that I had canceled the service because I couldn't afford the bill. I thought about him driving around town looking for me, checking every cheap motel and boarding house. I thought about Sarah pacing their expensive house, realizing that all her plans for spending $7 million had just evaporated. Mrs. Patterson, I said quietly, if Martin comes by again, you can tell him something for me. What's that, dear? Tell him I'm fine. Tell him I'm exactly where I belong. And for the first time since Tuesday morning, that was actually true. The next morning, I bought a newspaper and sat in the motel's lobby reading it while drinking coffee from a machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. I was looking for apartments, thinking about what I could afford on my Social Security check, when I saw it. A small article on page 3. Local man claims $7 million lottery prize. There was a picture of Martin and Sarah standing outside the lottery office, both of them trying to smile for the camera. The article explained that there had been some initial confusion about the ticket registration, but that it was being resolved. Except it wasn't being resolved. At least not the way they wanted it to be. I folded the newspaper carefully and walked back to my room. It was time to make some phone calls of my own. By Friday morning, Martin was driving around town like a man possessed. I watched him from the window of Dorothy Chen's guest bedroom as he slowly cruised down Maple Street for the third time that day, his head turning left and right like he expected to find me hiding behind a mailbox. Dorothy had been my next-door neighbor for 27 years, ever since she and her husband moved here from Taiwan. After Mr. Chun passed away 5 years ago, she and I had developed a quiet friendship built on shared widowhood, and the understanding that comes from both raising children alone. When I called her Thursday night from the motel, she didn't ask any questions. She just said, "Come home, Judy. Come stay with me." Her house was a mirror image of mine, just one door down. From her guest room window, I had a perfect view of my own front yard, where Martin's car kept appearing every few hours like clockwork. Sometimes Sarah was with him, sometimes he was alone, but the desperation on his face was always the same. "He looks terrible," Dorothy observed, handing me a cup of green tea. She was 72 and moved slowly these days, but her mind was sharp as ever. When was the last time that boy ate a proper meal? I watched Martin get out of his car and walk up to my front door again, probably hoping against hope that I had somehow magically returned while he wasn't looking. He cupped his hands against the living room window and peered inside, then tried the door handle even though he had to know it was locked. He had the keys after all. He could have gone inside any time he wanted, but going inside would mean admitting that I was really gone. "Dorothy," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Do you think I'm a bad mother?" She set down her teacup and looked at me with the kind of direct stare that only comes with age and experience. "Judy Patterson, in all the years I've known you, that boy never once went hungry, never once went without clothes on his back, never once doubted that he was loved. You worked yourself half to death to give him opportunities you never had. How could you possibly be a bad mother? Then why did he turn out like this?" Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, watching Martin kick at the loose step on my front porch that I had never been able to afford to fix. "Sometimes," she said finally, "when we love too much, we forget to teach our children how to love back." Her words hit me like a physical blow because I knew they were true. I had given Martin everything he ever wanted, but I had never required anything from him in return. Not respect, not gratitude, not even basic kindness. I had taught him that love was something he deserved simply for existing, not something he needed to earn or reciprocate. The phone calls had started Wednesday night. Martin tried my old number dozens of times before remembering that I had disconnected it months ago when the bill became too much. Then he started calling everyone we both knew. Mrs. Patterson told me he had contacted my former coworkers at the diner, old friends from church, even the social worker who had helped me apply for food stamps after Robert died. "Judy, please," he had begged Mrs. Patterson over the phone. "I just need to talk to my mother. I need to explain." But Mrs. Patterson was nobody's fool. "Explain what, Martin? Explain why you threw your mother out of her own home? Explain why you treated her like garbage in front of the whole neighborhood? Some things don't need explaining, young man." Sarah, meanwhile, was taking a different approach. She had started a social media campaign, posting pictures of me with captions about how worried they were about their missing family member. She portrayed herself as the caring daughter-in-law, devastated that her husband's poor old mother had wandered off after a family disagreement. Dorothy showed me the posts on her tablet Friday afternoon. Sarah had managed to make herself look like a saint and me look like a confused old woman who couldn't handle stress. She had even included our old address and asked people to call if they saw me wandering around. "That girl has no shame," Dorothy muttered, scrolling through the comments. "Look at this one. Sarah, you're such a good daughter-in-law for caring so much. I hope you find her soon. These people don't know anything about what really happened." I studied Sarah's carefully composed face in the photos. She was good at this, I had to admit. She knew exactly how to present herself to get sympathy and support. She probably had people thinking that I was some kind of burden that she and Martin had been heroically caring for until I became too difficult to handle. "The funny thing is," I told Dorothy, "she's not worried about me at all. She's worried about $7 million walking around with legs." That afternoon, Martin tried a new tactic. He went to the police station and filed a missing person report. I found out because Officer Rodriguez, who had gone to high school with Martin, called Mrs. Patterson to ask if she had seen me. "Your son says you might be suffering from some kind of mental episode," Officer Rodriguez told her. "He says you left after a family argument, and he's concerned you might hurt yourself." Mrs. Patterson's response was swift and sharp. "That boy is lying through his teeth, Officer Rodriguez. Judy Patterson is the sanest woman I know, and if she left that house, it's because she had good reason. You want to know what really happened? Martin threw his mother out like garbage after winning the lottery. He's not worried about her safety. He's worried about his money." By Saturday, Martin's search had become more frantic. He was calling hospitals, homeless shelters, even the county morgue. Sarah was still posting on social media, but her tone was getting sharper, more demanding. She was running out of patience with the whole charade. I was beginning to understand something that had taken me 65 years to learn. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who know you the least. Martin thought I was helpless without him. Thought I would come crawling back within a few days, broken and grateful for any scraps of affection he might throw my way. He had no idea that I was sitting one house away, warm and fed and surprisingly at peace, watching him destroy himself with panic over money that was never his to begin with. On Sunday morning, exactly 1 week after I had bought that winning lottery ticket, Martin sat in his car outside my house for 2 straight hours, staring at the windows like he could will me to appear. I watched him through Dorothy's lace curtains, and for the first time since Tuesday, I felt something that might have been pity. He looked smaller somehow, hunched over his steering wheel with his cell phone pressed to his ear. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see his mouth moving frantically, probably leaving another voicemail on some number he thought might reach me. "You know," Dorothy said, bringing me another cup of tea, "you're going to have to face him eventually." "I know." I took a sip of the tea and felt its warmth spread through my chest. "But not yet. Not until I'm ready." "And when will that be?" I smiled, still watching my son search desperately for something he had thrown away without a second thought. "When I figure out exactly what I want to say." On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after Martin had thrown me out, I decided it was time. I had spent 7 days watching him unravel from Dorothy's window, 7 days of peace that had given me something I hadn't felt in decades: clarity. I called Martin's cell phone at 9:15 a.m. He answered on the first ring. "Mom." His voice was hoarse, desperate. "Mom, where are you? I've been looking everywhere. I've been so worried." "Meet me at Riverside Park," I said calmly. "The bench by the old oak tree." 1 hour. Mom, wait, I need to explain. I hung up. Dorothy insisted on driving me, even though I told her I could walk. Nonsense, she said, grabbing her car keys with hands that shook slightly from arthritis. You shouldn't have to face this alone. The park was nearly empty at 10:15 on a Monday morning. Just a few joggers and a mother pushing her toddler on the swings. I sat on the bench where Martin and I used to feed the ducks when he was little, back when 25 cents worth of stale bread was our idea of an expensive outing. Martin arrived within 10 minutes, practically running across the grass. Sarah was with him, of course, trailing a few steps behind in heels completely inappropriate for walking on grass. She was dressed like she was going to a business meeting, all sharp lines and careful makeup. Even in crisis, she had to maintain her image. Mom! Martin stopped a few feet away from the bench, breathing heavily. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Thank God you're okay. Thought. I was afraid. You were afraid you'd lost $7 million, I said quietly. The words hit him like a slap. His mouth opened and closed a few times before any sound came out. No, that's not. I was worried about you, Mom. You just disappeared. I didn't disappear, Martin. You threw me out. There's a difference. Sarah stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. Judy, we were so worried. Martin has been beside himself. We've been calling hospitals, shelters. We thought something terrible had happened to you. I looked at her carefully. She was good at this performance, I had to give her credit. But I had learned something important in the past week. I didn't have to pretend anymore. Cut the act, Sarah. We both know why you're here. Her mask slipped for just a second, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. I don't know what you mean. The lottery ticket is in my name. My name, not Martin's. You need me to claim the prize, and you hate that. Martin sat down heavily on the bench beside me, putting his head in his hands. Mom, I messed up. I know I messed up. I was so excited about the money, and Sarah said. What did Sarah say, Martin? He glanced up at his wife, and I saw something I had never seen before, fear. He was afraid of her, afraid of disappointing her, afraid of not being the man she wanted him to be. She said that maybe it was time for you to be more independent, that we were enabling you by letting you live with us. Letting me live with you? I couldn't keep the bitter laugh from escaping. Martin, that was my house. I've been paying the mortgage on that house for 6 years. When you couldn't find work after college, when Sarah wanted to quit her job to become a lifestyle blogger, who do you think kept that roof over your heads? Sarah's face flushed red. That's not true. Martin's been supporting that household. With what money? I turned to look at her directly. Martin hasn't held a steady job in 3 years. You've never worked more than a few months at a time. The mortgage payments, the utilities, the grocery bills, I have the bank statements, Sarah. I have proof of every transfer, every payment, every time I chose between eating dinner and keeping your lights on. Martin was staring at me now, and I could see the realization dawning on his face. All those times I had said money was tight, all those times I had claimed I couldn't afford things for myself, he had never bothered to ask where our household money was actually coming from. But you never said anything, he whispered. I didn't want you to feel guilty. I wanted you to believe you were taking care of yourself, taking care of your wife. I wanted you to feel like a man. Sarah's voice turned sharp, all pretense of concern gone. Look, this is all very touching, but we need to talk about the practical issues here. That lottery ticket belongs to our family. Martin picked those numbers. He's been playing those numbers for years. With my money, I said simply. Every week for 12 years, I bought those tickets with my money. I let Martin pick the numbers because I wanted him to feel involved, but I was always the one who filled out the back, always the one who signed my name. That's just a technicality, Sarah snapped. Any reasonable person would understand that. Any reasonable person would understand that when you throw someone out of their own home and tell them they're going to die poor, you don't get to claim their lottery winnings. Martin looked up at me then, and I saw tears in his eyes. Real tears, not the crocodile tears Sarah had been producing all week. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. The money, it made me crazy for a minute. But I love you. You know I love you. I studied his face, looking for the little boy I had raised, The child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. He was still in there somewhere, buried under years of Sarah's influence and his own selfish choices. Martin, I said gently, do you love me or do you love what I can give you? He blinked confused. What do you mean? I mean, if I weren't sitting here with a $7 million lottery ticket in my name, would you have spent the last week looking for me? Would you have called hospitals and shelters and filed police reports? Or would you have been relieved that the burden of your aging mother was finally off your shoulders? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Sarah stepped closer to Martin, her hand possessively on his shoulder. Don't answer that, she said quickly. She's trying to manipulate you. She's trying to make you feel guilty so you'll do what she wants. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after sitting too long. What I want, Sarah, is something you can't understand. What I want is to have raised a son who would never treat his mother the way Martin treated me last Tuesday. What I want is to have mattered to him when I was poor just as much as I matter to him now that I'm rich. Martin reached for my hand. You do matter, Mom. You've always mattered. I looked down at him, this man who was still, somehow, my little boy. Then prove it. I gave Martin exactly what he asked for. A chance to prove that he loved me for more than my money. I told him I needed time to think, that I would make my decision about the lottery ticket in 2 weeks. If he truly cared about me, if he truly regretted his actions, then those 2 weeks would be about rebuilding our relationship, not badgering me about $7 million. He failed within 48 hours. The first call came Tuesday night. Mom, I've been thinking about the ticket, and maybe we should claim it soon. You know, before something happens to it. The second call came Wednesday morning. Sarah's been doing some research, and apparently there are tax advantages to claiming lottery prizes quickly. By Thursday, he was showing up at Dorothy's house unannounced, always with some urgent reason why we needed to go to the lottery office immediately. Sarah started leaving voicemails about how selfish I was being, how I was destroying their marriage by creating unnecessary stress. On Friday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after that terrible Tuesday when he had thrown me out, I claimed the lottery ticket. But I didn't tell Martin. I didn't tell anyone except Dorothy, who drove me to the lottery office and held my hand while I signed the paperwork. $7 million minus taxes paid out over 20 years. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Enough to never depend on anyone ever again. I used the first payment to buy a small house in Cedar Falls, a town about 3 hours away where nobody knew my story. It was a modest place with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that got morning sunlight, and a backyard just big enough for a vegetable garden. The kind of house I had always dreamed of but never thought I could afford. Martin found out about the lottery claim when his lawyer called him Monday morning. He had hired an attorney, planning to contest my right to the prize. The lawyer had to deliver some disappointing news. I had already claimed it, the money was already in my account, and there was absolutely nothing Martin could do about it. He called me 17 times that day. I answered once. Mom, why didn't you tell me? We could have celebrated together. We could have planned. Planned what, Martin? Planned how you were going to spend my money. It's not like that. I thought we were going to work this out as a family. Family. I repeated the word slowly. When you threw me out of my own house, when you told me I would die poor, when you recorded it all on your phone to humiliate me. Was that family? Silence. Martin, I spent 30 years putting you first. I gave up everything, relationships, opportunities, my own dreams, to make sure you had every advantage I never had. And the moment you thought you didn't need me anymore, you threw me away like garbage. I was wrong, he whispered. I know I was wrong. But can't we move past this? Can't we start over? We are starting over, I said gently. You're starting over as a man who has to live with the consequences of his choices. And I'm starting over as a woman who finally learned that being someone's mother doesn't mean being their doormat. I hung up and turned off my phone. The house in Cedar Falls came with neighbors who didn't know my history, didn't know about my failures as a mother or my son's cruelty. Mrs. Henderson next door brought me tomatoes from her garden. Mr. Walsh across the street helped me plant tulip bulbs that would bloom in spring. The librarian downtown, a kind woman named Patricia, invited me to join the book club. For the first time in decades, I was just Judy. Not Martin's mother, not Robert's widow, not the woman who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. Just Judy, a woman with her own house, her own money, her own choices. I heard through Dorothy, who heard through Mrs. Patterson, that Martin and Sarah's marriage was struggling. Apparently, Sarah had been counting on that lottery money to fund some grand lifestyle she had planned. When the money didn't materialize, when she realized she was married to an unemployed man with no prospects and no rich mother to fall back on, her interest in the relationship began to wane. They separated 6 months after I moved away. Sarah filed for divorce 8 months later, claiming irreconcilable differences. Martin moved back into my old house, the house I had paid off with my lottery winnings, and legally transferred to him in a final act of maternal generosity. He was alone there now, surrounded by memories of the mother who had loved him too much and the wife who had never loved him at all. He still calls sometimes. The number changes, he's had to get new phones when he couldn't pay the bills. But I always recognize his voice. The conversations are different now. Shorter. Less demanding. He doesn't ask for money anymore, probably because he knows I won't give it to him. Instead, he asks about my health, my house, my garden. "Mom," he said during our last conversation 3 months ago, "I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I lost." "What did you lose, Martin?" "I lost the only person who ever loved me unconditionally." I was quiet for a long time, standing in my kitchen watching cardinals at the bird feeder I had hung outside the window. "No, sweetheart," I said finally. "You lost the person who loved you without requiring you to love her back. That's not the same thing. I'm 70 now. I spend my mornings tending my garden, my afternoons reading books I never had time for when I was working myself to death, my evenings cooking meals for one in a kitchen that belongs entirely to me. I volunteer at the animal shelter on Wednesdays and teach literacy classes at the community center on Saturdays. Sometimes I think about the life I might have had if I had learned earlier to love myself as much as I loved my son. But mostly I try not to think about the past at all. The past is full of sacrifices and regrets and chances I didn't take, because I was too busy being the perfect mother to an imperfect child. The future, though, the future is full of possibilities. I keep Martin's last voicemail saved on my phone, not because I plan to call him back, but because it reminds me of something important. He said he was sorry, that he had learned his lesson, that he wanted to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. Maybe someday I'll believe him. Maybe someday I'll be ready to try again. But that day hasn't come yet. And I've learned that it's okay to take as much time as I need. For the first time in my life, I'm in no hurry to sacrifice my peace for someone else's comfort. Not even my son's.